Aging is a major risk factor for many diseases, from cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases, diabetes to cancer. Diseases can have a biological basis from aging. So just being alive long enough on the planet is a risk factor for certain diseases. It's with great pleasure that I welcome Oz Garcia. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Oz Garcia is recognized as a leading authority on age reversal and healthy aging. As a nutritionist to the stars, Oz is the go-to nutritionist for A-list celebrities and Fortune 100 CEOs. He has a unique and customized approach to nutrition and anti-aging, coupled with more than 30 years of experience, has made Oz one of the most recognizable names in the industry. He's lectured all over the world, has been a pioneer in the study of nutrition and anti-aging. Oz is the best-selling author of 4 books: The Food Cure for Kids, The Balance, Look and Feel Fabulous Forever, and Redesigning 50, The No Plastic Surgery Guide to 21st Century Age Defiance, and that's by HarperCollins. He's been voted Best Nutritionist by New York Magazine and is frequently called upon by some of the most respected names in medicine and news media for his up-to-the-minute views on nutrition and its role in aging and longevity. Oz has been featured in Vogue, Elle, Travel and Leisure, W Magazine, the New York Times. He's also made numerous network and cable television appearances, including NBC's The Today Show, CBS Morning Show, Good Morning America on ABC, 2020, 48 Hours, The View, The Doctors, Access Hollywood, and Fox News. So Oz, if I could dive right in, can you please discuss some trends in age reversal science?
Trends in age reversal science. I got to look at this, answer it rather, from a very broad perspective. There's so much going on. For over 35 years that I've been doing this in terms of my business. And then prior to that, I would add in an extra about 10 years where I was practicing what I preach pretty much. I started in nutrition back around 1973. Wow. And I got interested at that point for a multitude of reasons, primarily my own health, certain concerns that I had, and whether or not there was a relationship between what I ate and the things that I suffered from, primarily migraine headaches, exhaustion, a number of other things that were a continual problem. And we're talking about an era where there was no internet, where there was no browser to go to look anything up. We would go to the New York City Public Library and kind of figure it out there. And growing up in New York, I had access to only, I think, 2, maybe 3 health food stores in New York City. There was no Whole Foods. There was nothing in terms of the health food areas in supermarkets in the way that there are today. So I kind of clawed my way through the 70s. I ran my first race marathon in 1979, and I've never looked back since then. Wow. So I've had the perspective of about 4 decades to look at any number of practices, products, changes in alternative medicine, which is what it used to be called then, or holistic medicine. And now we're getting to the point where we're looking at the world of self-optimization and exponential technologies. So when we're looking at trends, we're looking more at what we would refer to as exponential technologies. And that kind of pulls in a lot of what's happening that constitute more than just trends, but rather where things are now that we can begin to take advantage of for ourselves, we can leverage on, we can exploit, and what can we look at 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and so on. So I think where to start when we're talking about, let's say, trends possibly, I would say that what we're looking at, if we're talking about life extension, is also well-being extension. So that if you're alive, and so long as you're alive, that you're in relatively good condition, possibly great condition. And when you talk about longevity, escape velocity, we're talking about the fact that in the way things are going now, particular trends, exponential technologies, you can kick the can down the road until the next quote unquote trend shows up, technology shows up, that'll buy you another decade of performing at your best. Kick that can down the road a little bit longer. Something else will show up. So right now we're looking at a multitude of rapidly evolving movements within any number of categories. You can always begin with what we eat. You know, the fact that how food is put together will affect you, will affect me, will affect the listeners in very different ways. So we're moving away from looking at, let's say, the trend of eating paleo or eating vegan or being vegetarian or lacto-vegetarian, away from being stuck within a style of eating to understanding the functionality of food, how it is that particular foods work within our bodies, and knowing that there are very broad, very general aspects of foods, very large swaths of different food categories that are going to impact us for the better or for the worse. We do know, and you know, for instance, that sugar is going to affect everybody adversely for a multitude of reasons. So there are very few people that have a biology, not that I know any at all, that can metabolize sugar in any form without it causing tremendous damage within their system. Now, that being said, there are particular sugars that are found in certain foods, let's say fruits and certain fruit categories, that will work well for most people most of the time because of all the chemistry, all the chemicals that are found in them. I could select blueberries because everybody understands what they are and can get their hands on them and know that they have a direct impact on your body in a multitude of ways. The antioxidants they provide, and the fact that something so basic as eating 4 to 6 servings, a handful of servings of blueberries a week, seem to actually improve how the brain works, goes to my point about functionality.
Yes.
So when I talk about functionality, I'm talking about what does anything that I consume do to my body? Mm-hmm. Well, so we could go from carbohydrates, complex carbs, to proteins, to essential fats, to vegetables, to fruits, and anything else that you can think of that may not be found naturally or brought up through agriculture, things that are actually lab created that can have an impact on our body. So in that regard, I would say that it's not only what we eat, but we're looking also at the fact that human beings are designed not to eat. By that I mean that if you look at evolution, if you look at the way that we must have evolved as hunters and gatherers primarily, we would go through periods of time, Doc, where we would, as we would go through our hunting grounds, not be able to catch anything. If we were looking at an antelope 500 yards in front of us, you could bet that there were probably several hundred other predatory eyeballs looking at it. And you'd be lucky if indeed you'd be able to get that antelope that day for lunch. It would be one more that I missed. So you would go for a day or two, maybe 3, where you would eat very, very little and finally get a nice big piece of protein and fat and gorge on it. And when you look at how the human body is built, it's built in large measure to go through periods of underfeeding and feeding. Underfeeding and feeding, what's now being referred to as intermittent fasting. So I would say that there's a technology, we could call it a trend, but it's where you begin to incorporate periods of time within your week, maybe within your month, where you begin to have small periods of underfeeding, and then periods where you feed. It could be in a week, in a 7-day period, where what you do is you have a 20-hour period where you don't eat. You stay primarily on fluids, on diluted broths, diluted juices, and maybe have a 4-hour feeding window. And you're selective in terms of your choices, and we could go deeper into that. But that's called intermittent fasting, where rather than be on the old school way, which is what I used to do years ago, where you could stay on a water fast for 5 days, 7 days, and so on, we can produce very similar effects by underfeeding ourselves for several days and then going back to feeding. and doing that on a regular basis. So intermittent fasting, I would say, is an emerging technology. And yes, we could say it's a trend. And it's pretty much one of the ways that I live. Now, what we know when you look at much of the science behind intermittent fasting is there are really quite unusual things that you can do to your body in terms of repairing it, slowing down damage, and actually putting a braking system, mutations within DNA expression. One of the great thinkers right now in intermittent fasting is a man named Walter Longo out of the University of San Bernardino in California, and has pretty much put together an unusual way to think about intermittent fasting, which everybody can do, and the evidence that he's put together in terms of how it reduces cardiovascular events, certainly if you're at risk for it, ability to regulate autoimmune problems. Beyond that, how to correct insidious problems that go on with our digestive system, how you can actually detox the body by doing a modified water fast. And his study can be caught on YouTube. I can't recommend enough of looking at intermittent fasting becoming a practice of what it is that we all do. So now we're talking about, I would say, yes, a trend and an emerging technology. Beyond that, I think looking at very busy lifestyles, the ways that people are today, and the fact that they need to move, that they need to actually get exercise, there's been an emerging trend where we're discovering that even 20 minutes a day of exercising in a very high intensive manner, it appears that that period of time mimics what most people can achieve in a gym in an hour to an hour and a half. So high intensity interval training, or HIIT, is turning out to be a pretty remarkable trend. I'll do HIIT training about 3-4 times in my week, given my schedule. And then on the weekends, I'll go do my leisurely workouts or my runs because I just love running outdoors. So high intensity interval training, I would say, is an emerging technology. Certainly, it's moving away from being a trend to one of the ways that we can use our time more effectively. The most interesting thing among all of this is the role of sleep. And here we could also talk for quite a while, as we could about any one of these trends in self-optimization. But sleep is turning out to be even more important than anybody could have ever predicted. Arianna Huffington came out with a book, I think in the last year or two, entitled Sleep. Everybody, every hacker, every thinker in the area of maintaining age relevance as we get older is pointing towards sleep. Like, you know what, you got to get your 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And if you could track it, it would be even better. So I would say an emerging trend is how well you can track what it is that goes on with your sleep. There are different levels of sleep when you're in bed. Sleep itself is an extremely dynamic aspect of your day. Just happens to be taking place at night. But there are levels that we move through. We move through REM sleep. We move through deep sleep. We have light sleep. We may have periods where we wake up. And it's important to know the amount of each one of those categories that you get so that you can then begin to correct your practices if you're waking up in the morning tired, if you're going through your day exhausted, if you find that you can't think as well as you'd like to, rather than look first and foremost to what's the supplement that I need. I need a cup of coffee or 2 cups of coffee in order to get through my day. Understand your quality of sleep. So I would say what would be considered an aspect of exponential technologies within health is using a device that can actually allow you to measure that. So Fitbit, for instance, makes a wristband that'll allow you to measure every level of sleep that you go through and track it for you. There's a ring that you can order. You can order online. It's called the Oura Ring, O-U-R-A, and it's kind of the beginning stages of artificial intelligence in terms of reading what's going on with you, and in some very unusual way can support you in adapting your practices so that you get better quality deep sleep, longer deep sleep, and you'll find that you wake up in the morning refreshed and ready to take your day on in the way that you ought to. What I like about the Oura Ring is it'll actually, based on your sleep, give you a score for how well you're going to do on that day. So you're getting a trend. You're able to look over weeks and months. It measures your heart rate variability. It measures your body temperature. It measures your heart rate. And all of this is data that then will allow you to adjust the time you go to sleep, what's the last meal you'll have. If you do better, perhaps skipping a meal several times a week, if that improves your deep sleep, etc. So sleep is turning out to be, believe it or not, one hell of a trend right now. I want to stop there for a moment and turn the baton over to you because I could keep on talking about trends.
No, I think that's fantastic. And you know what fascinates me, Oz, is when we're lacking sleep, we crave more carbohydrates and sugars. And you mentioned the deleterious effects of sugars, and particularly refined sugars in general, right? We're not talking about the wonders of blueberries. And then the combination of lack of sleep and the desire to eat and more of the time give in to that temptation results in one of these diseases of aging, which is diabetes. And we know from clinical studies that the higher your fasting glucose, the more rapid you seem to be aging inside. I actually used to call it rusting from within. I remember giving a master class for that for years for medical doctors as part of their CMEs, and would draw out the exact map of that binding to various amino acids. One of them would be lysine, and it forms this irreparable damaged component that starts destroying our cells from within. Really horrible and a definite disease risk factor. That's fascinating. In this first part of the show, we now actually have an answer to one of the questions I was going to ask you. I was going to ask, could you give your opinion on some small steps that people can implement to slow the aging process? Because everybody wants a quick fix to some extent. And I'm not saying that in a harmful way about anybody or an opinionated way, just saying that a lot of people are like, this is wonderful information, but what could I start immediately? And one of them, if we go in just a mixed order, is, hey, why not get a grip on your sleep? That's a great place to start, as best as you possibly can. And
no question about it.
Right? That's incredible. And how hard could it be to implement some high intensity interval training into an exercise program instead of just, hey, I'm just going to monotonously spend the next 45 minutes on an elliptical at a set speed while I watch a TV program or Netflix or one of those things. That's really, would you agree with me, Oz? That's not the most efficient way to train?
In terms of HIIT, no question about it. I get great results with it. I feel terrific. And I don't blow my fuses out every morning the way that I could now at this age, let's say. But for years, it always had to be 45 minutes to an hour almost every day. And the fact that you can do high intensive interval training on a regularly, and you're done in 20 minutes is really quite remarkable given the results that you get. Mm-hmm. There are a number of studies that are out there. There's actually a fascinating book. It's entitled The 1 Minute Workout. And it's not really about doing 1 minute, but it's like it's doing the 20 minutes, 1 minute at a time, yes. Where the results are cited in terms of what are the accrued benefits that you get by doing, HIIT as opposed to an hour every day. And it looks like by doing high intensive interval training on a regular basis, you're getting pretty much the same result. So instead of doing the hour, in 20 minutes, you seem to achieve the same result, right?
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I also wanted to say, and please tell me if you agree with this, Oz, I've noticed when people do this correctly, they're also less prone to getting injured and thus can maintain an exercise program more steady.
That's very true. And I'm even beginning to find that there are individuals that are hacking the 20 minutes. There's now devices, exercise devices that you can use 3 minutes several times a week. I don't know that I'm there yet. I'm still looking at the technology, but these are, again, emerging technologies that are here already. that produce these very dramatic effects within the human body for less and less amounts of time. So again, what we're finding is reduction in injury, quicker recovery times. When you talk about sleep, we really got to look at sleep hygiene, whether people go to sleep with all the devices on, if they're looking at TV before they go to bed, the impact of the TV screen itself, never mind the content, on the optic nerve and the ability to produce melatonin adequately. That's a problem. Secondarily is how many of us use TV to come down. And we're also looking at our cell phone right up to the last minute. Have our laptop on our bed, our cell phone, TV set going, lights on, and then we wonder why we don't sleep so well or why we can't enter deep sleep. There alone, we know that you should probably turn your cell phone off a couple of hours before bed and let it charge in a different room.
What I love right now, my immediate reaction to hearing this is a problem I've seen since the days of the BlackBerry. I used to remember in practice, Oz, I'd see these CEOs come in with a BlackBerry attached to their belt as if it was another organ. And every time and they'd have it on mute, but it would buzz, it would vibrate on their belt. And every time it would vibrate, you could see their pupils dilate. I felt like they were getting a squirt of adrenaline from the adrenal cortex. And you can't live that way.
But what we do know is if you're going to have your phone on at night, you can go to your settings section and actually adapt your phone so that as the sun goes down, it moves away from the blue spectrum lighting and it runs a little bit more yellow-red, which, you know, if you have to use your phone, it's going to affect your brain minimally and your sleep minimally.
The one thing I wish somebody would figure out, Oz, is as an older father of a 14-month-old, I used to sleep really well. Internal medicine destroyed my sleep, and then I was able to get really quality sleep. And then, of course, by default, through pregnancy to birth, sleep is no longer as fantastic as it used to be. So it is an adaptation that I think everyone goes through who decides to enter parenthood. It's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I'm not complaining. My little girl is just the greatest thing that ever happened to my wife and I, and we couldn't be more happy.
Remarkable.
But
it is a period to live through. It is a period to live through.
Yeah, it's a period to live through, but I will be honest, at 49, it's making me run out to get Redesigning 50 by Oz Garcia. So Oz, I have an interesting question. This is great stuff.
Sure.
You've given a lot of lectures around the world. Can you share with me and our listening audience what location was the most interesting, but for a specific reason, with regard to any health science technologies, anti-aging, belief systems within the medical community that you found so intriguing? Is there anything about where you have been globally where you were so intrigued about their view of anything in health science, health technologies, aging, a lot of what we're discussing today?
You know, I've literally have been all over the world to teach and work. Moscow to Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Israel, London, West Coast, South America, you name it. And the place that I found to be most mind-blowing was Indonesia, Bali. I was there several weeks ago. And I can't tell you enough about that particular experience. You know, the flight is direct from New York to Singapore. You're in the air for over 20 hours, and then you've got to continue from Singapore on to Bali. So I wasn't in the best condition when I got there, even though I did all the tricks and hacks that I know for flying. I'd never flown that long on a plane. And from the first morning that I was there, my host would get me up every morning. I was there for over a week, and drag me to go do yoga. We would do Bikram yoga every morning, every single day, the whole time that I was there.
Wow.
Most of Bali is all vegetarian, so I'm not vegetarian. I would say I'm quasi paleo / vegetarian intermittent faster. That's a conversation for another time. But I decided to just go vegetarian for the whole week, was doing some fasting, doing yoga every day, worked while I was there, lectured while I was there, and I completely fell in love with that part of the world. I don't like moving much from New York. I like to go to visit my family in Miami, come back to New York, escape from here periodically, but I completely forgot about New York the whole time that I was there.
Wow.
And followed my own rules. Didn't watch TV, looked at my phone only in the morning and in the evening, twice a day. I put on, around day 6, we turned the news on. I asked my host to put CNN on. And I'd not watched TV at that point for almost a week, and actually for a couple of days before I'd left. And it was as though a hand grenade went off in my brain. The impact of what was coming at me. And for quite a while, I've been looking at the value of watching the news every day, all the time, what that may do to us. And I could see in an instant, having been detoxed from CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and so on, how in an instant, it can throw you. And it reminded me of other times where I've done a digital detox. But here I was working out in a certain manner,
Wow.
having days that had long spells of downtime, quiet time. And then the 21st century just came at you like a bullet train through Tokyo. And I thought to myself, my God, I have to be much more conscious about the amount of news that I watch, because it does affect you. You're a little bit more tense, you're a little bit more anxious. And for some people, they're much more anxious, they're much more tense, they're debilitated in ways that they don't understand. If they roll out of bed in the morning, the first thing that they do is throw the news on. So it's not only that you're not using that time effectively to meditate, to cogitate, to give gratitude for the life that you have. Instead, it's being sucked into the content of the news, the instrument itself, and how much disruption that may be causing you before you even walk out your door to go to work. Certainly at nighttime, if you're doing that as a habit, and then you go into bed, it likely is doing something to your synapses, your dendrites, your neurons, all of it.
I actually 100% agree. I remember a long time ago when I was still in clinical practice, Andrew Weil actually recommended periodic complete news fasts. And if I may use it, it's sad. It's
Wow.
really sad I'm going to say this, but this comes right from my wife's mouth. One of the sayings in my house, my wife will say, put on the murder news. I know it's really sad to say such a horrible statement, but
Right.
you just want to know what's happening on in the world. We try to have it off, but you kind of want to pop in and know what's going on. And it's always starts with, how can you feel good when everything's all just horrendous news? So I can't agree with you more, Oz. It sets a framework for how you feel, how you think. I believe it does set how your mindset for the beginning of the day. When you start early in the morning, you didn't even leave your house or do what you love. Hopefully you're doing what you love to do in life, but you get out there and your breakfast is horrible information.
Correct.
No matter how you slice it, especially your local news. It's always, there's a stabbing here, a shooting there. This one was hurt.
Sure.
Was beat. Here's the list of arrests.
It looks like if you do break away from it, if you do have a detox from it, a holiday from the news, even a day a week, certainly if you could do 3 days a week or 4 days a week, doesn't look like much changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I kind of now leave it to, I want to get my news in sound bites. It's hard when if you are the parent of a young one and you have a lot going on right after my wife gave birth and you're kind of like on control to take care of this new life. You have the news on in the background and you start going, wait a minute, they're just repeating exactly what I heard 2 hours ago.
Yeah. Now this is to your point. What's an emerging trend? An emerging trend is digital holidays.
Yep. I love it.
Right? Take a digital break from the news. And it's being spoken about within yeah, biohacking circles, people that understand how the brain works and so on, much better than I do in terms of what else should you be doing. You have to have digital breaks, and you should not be watching the news before you go to bed at all.
Oh, goodness, yes. I completely agree with you. Something light, and like you, I agree in the blue light toxicity syndrome. It completely improves our neurochemistry, the pineal gland releasing melatonin. Melatonin is an anti-aging hormone. It's not just a sleep aid. It's so crucial. But then some of us are so inundated with bad information that we don't even produce effectively enough melatonin, which is manufactured from serotonin. So if you're an individual that unfortunately has low levels of serotonin, we just opened a can of worms of problems, and that's a whole separate topic. But I would dare, you know what, Oz, I would honestly say that taking a fast from the news periodically, I'm not asking anyone to put their head in the sand, but taking a fast from the news periodically is a potential potent anti-aging therapy. May I be so bold?
Well, you're correct. Twice this year I've done it, and everything's still the same. You know, it's still the same. I came back from Bali, and everything's still the same. Earlier in the year, I did the same thing also. I did a meditative program for a week where they take your cell phone away, and you can't watch the news for a week. And at the end of it, you know, you're still going to the airport, you're still seeing Hudson News. Before you know it, you're back. But the amount of mental relief that you get from not watching the news and having done that as a mental fast is really quite remarkable.
I think and I've done it multiple times in my life for the duration you have, and I found it to be just one of the most incredible detaching situations you could possibly do. There was one period of time, my wife found this amazing spot in the British Virgin Islands when I was really deep in practice. And I really needed to it's important to detox yourself so many different ways. And I've always been a fan of Deepak Chopra, read all his books. You know, I'm a devout clinical scientist. And the fact that Deepak really touched me, he used to say some just really profound sound bites. These sound bites are gold. I was like, one of the things I will never get out of my head is you can turn nectar into poison with your emotions. And I used to always talk to people about, you know, don't make a decision about the foods you're eating if you just got out of a really furious argument or you got berated by your employer and then you're sitting down to lunch and wondering why your grilled chicken kale salad with a drizzle of olive oil is killing your stomach. It's actually because you're in the fight or flight response. All blood flow left your digestive organs to go to your musculature to either fight or flee this horrendous situation. You upregulated the stress hormone, long-lasting stress hormone, may I add, norepinephrine, that is not being tried because you need to, again, flight or flee. That is not a good time to look at what you're consuming. But if you live in that environment, and if media and news does that to you, take a break. So the very first time, if I could share this quick anecdote, and I hope it touches your heart the way it did mine, knowing a little bit about your history. But one of my favorite eye-opening experiences traveling was when I, at the time, had to sneak into, but got into Cuba in my extremely early 30s for 11 days. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I mean, beautiful, amazing people. I was leveled at the knowledge of physicians in medicine. I was spent a lot of time at the hospitals. I was given grand tours. The respect they gave me walking in there was just unbelievable. And I loved how at the time, and I couldn't replicate it back then, there was companies hawking similar products, but nothing was like in Cuba. Cuba had air quote medication that was made from sugarcane, contained zero sugar. It was basically the alcohols after the sugar that are associated with disrupting lipid metabolism within the liver. In the States, it was used as polycosanol, but it just, nothing was like the Cuba stuff. But I watched serious LDL, and of course the bad kind of LDL. We know that there's bad cholesterol, but then there's bad cholesterol, right? Not the big fluffy ones, the really tight ones that cause problems. And they were showing me data at the time. They were running fractionated cholesterol when I was in my very early 30s, and here I am at 49. And they were using, for all intents and purposes, plant-based medicines as prescription drugs to address this problem. On top of that, I was just completely disconnected from society. No cell phone, no no television, just me communicating with people, living and walking around.
Yes.
It was a beautiful experience.
Yeah, and again, there's a country which has been cut off from the U.S., as part of the embargo, and they've had to look inward, and we've found a multitude of extremely novel products that they've come up with that you just would never find anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely.
My staff is Cuban, I'm Cuban,
Yeah.
and exploring that community of quote unquote medical products, some of them completely blew us away in terms of their effectiveness, and too bad that they're not, many of those products are not being used here, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I absolutely agree. One thing I'd like to talk about, Oscar, is we're covering some really cool areas, talking about everything from our emotions to the media to sleep. It's really our planet where we're all living, and we're all trying to be healthier people. What I have witnessed from graduate school to present, because really paying attention, studying everything from human nutrition to nanomedicine, is I can't ignore this fact. So we had this USDA database for years that's logging how we know how much vitamin K is in spinach leaves and kale and collard greens, level of calcium. We have this great database. But then I'm watching the destruction of the soil on the planet. I'm watching the measured introduction of various new chemicals every year post World War II. So we got the commercialized chemical farming industry. Now we have this new problem. Well, I wouldn't say new, but more on the radar, and it's on like the home page of the EPA. So we have the awareness and belief of our own Environmental Protection Agency saying the increase in carbon dioxide emissions is actually changing the nutritional content of what we find in our plants. So I want to make this very clear to the listening audience. This means if your farm is organic, it is being impacted. We live in a toxic world where I never say organic is free of, I say it's less of various toxins we're trying to avoid. But here's a fact that the EPA states, and I'm going to tie it to something I believe you agree with, and I'd love to get your opinion on it.
Yes.
EPA states these increased levels of CO2 actually can reduce the protein content of specific plants and legumes and pulses and things that people need to survive. And let's not attack a specific food group. Like, for example, the EPA measured and proved that soybeans in an environment that has high CO2 have less nitrogen and less protein. And I get I haven't had soy in 20 plus years. I get that. But you can't just then say it's the soy. Trust me, then it's impacting other things. It's going to impact almonds. It's going to impact peas. It's going to affect other foods on the planet. So for me, there's no way now for any group to suggest that there's no place for targeted supplementation. So with the change in our planet, I'd love to know your opinion on how you implement dietary supplements in your practice from an individualized nutrition perspective, which I know is the basis of what you do and talked about now, to also what's going on in our planet, and can we really just say, eat this super healthy diet for you from organic farming and pray and cross our fingers that you're getting all the nutrients that they're supposed to contain?
In a perfect world, and it's hardly that, and more so in an idealistic world where people think that even if they ate organic everything and the environment were pristine, that they can't optimize from where they are using just, the best food that there is and eating properly and whatever that may mean for a person. I'm interested in how can I maximize my biological efficiency. So in many ways, I'm looking for certain kinds of durability, superpowers, et cetera, that I'm not going to get just by eating, impeccable meals. That's just not the way it works. It's the same thing if you were to say to me, or somebody was going to say to me, well, I eat all organic and it's all, steamed or stir fried with, triple X, virgin olive oil. You want to get to California, you got a day to get there. Yes, the natural way would be for a bipedal animal like us to walk from New York to California. It's just not going to happen. You're going to take advantage of technology. You're going to get on a plane, you're going to land there, and that's how you're going to do it. You drive a car, mobile phone. I could go on and on and on. In other words, you got to know that there are advantages to technology.
Mm-hmm.
So using supplementation is taking advantage of technology. We know that there are certain nutrient categories that when you use them above and beyond what's available in food, you're going to have a major impact in terms of the quality of how any organ system works, the rate at which your telomeres, which are the tips in your DNA, are degrading or not, reducing your risk of any degenerative disease. As you get older, more degenerative diseases show up as we do get older, obviously, as we produce more DNA mutations, cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease. And you can reduce your chances of any of these things occurring by working with certain nutrients that you typically are not going to get in the concentrations that you require in your food. So I'm a big fan, for instance, of acetyl L-carnitine. Acetylated carnitine. Carnitine is an amino acid, but you're not going to find it in an acetylated form, no matter how many foods you eat, whatever form, to produce the kind of impact on thinking, on memory, long-term, short-term, focus, vigilance, alertness, that you will by taking acetylated L-carnitine as a supplement. We do know that vitamin K in higher amounts than what's recommended typically seems to have also a cardiovascular protective effect. We know that eating beets is terrific, dense in certain nutrients, micronutrients, et cetera, but we also know that when you concentrate beets and you concentrate them way down and you use it as a supplement, let's say in a smoothie, it improves the levels of nitric oxide within your body. What does that mean? Well, nitric oxide improves power, energy, the ability to work out better, the ability to build a better muscle. And you can't eat enough beets to get the amount that you get by using nitric oxide enhancing supplements, let's say made by beets, right? So you and I could go category by category by category and find that you can optimize your health, your current state of well-being by using the miracle of science, for heaven's sakes, in different categories, whether it's certain vitamins, whether it's certain minerals, whether it's certain amino acids, essential fatty acids, nootropics, probiotics. I could go on category by category, but what you can do is you can engineer your biology and produce in a way escape velocity from what's only available if you're only eating well. Mm-hmm. You can use modern science and technology with supplements and nutraceuticals to actually develop a body that can endure. As the years go on, endure.
Wow. That's an excellent way to look at it, Oz. Oz, my friend, I just want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time. You're
welcome.
I know how busy you are and how much traveling you do and lecturing. So this meant a lot to me, my friend. And I want for all our listeners, we'll make sure you have links and access to be able to find about Oz. The easiest way is ozgarcia.com. Definitely head that direction to learn more about what Oz is up to. Oz, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pastore. We'll talk soon. Be well, sir.
Thank you very much. Take care, my friend.
Bye.